are just apparitions. They are apparitions of reality itself, of radiant presence, which is what you actually are, which is what is actually here. In the dream, there's only the one thing present, the dreaming itself, and all the complexities are artifacts of that actuality. And likewise, there's only one thing present here, radiant presence, which is what you actually are. So this is the field of radiant presence. This is you. This is reality. And all of the complexities, all of the details and the stuff and the matter, all of the world and all of that is nothing other than this reality, but it has no reality of its own in terms of the way it seems to be, the way it appears to be, and the conclusions that interpretation draws about the nature of what's appearing and the interrelationships and the way they function and so on and so forth. Everything is being made up on the spot in exactly the same way that in a dream, what appears is being made up on the spot. It doesn't need to be prepared for. A dream can turn on a dime, but whatever needs to happen is just bang, it's just there. But there's no preparation necessarily or forethought. There's no staging that needs to be done before the fact. It just, bang, it just appears effortlessly and instantaneously. Likewise, all of the actualities that seem to appear in your present experience just appear, bang, right here. There's no precedent. There's no preparation. There's no development. It's just an instantaneous improvisation, essentially. And of course, yoga is about discovering this fact, discovering, first of all, the actuality of radiant presence, feeling the truth of it, coming to see the truth of it, which is self-evident because you already feel it, you already are it, you already know it. And then from that perspective, the context of what all of this apparition is in relation to that becomes pretty clear and very simple. This actuality that is here, that you are, is absolutely inclusive of every aspect of itself. It's like an infinite fractal. It has no aspects whatsoever that are in any way oriented to any other aspects of it whatsoever, except as being the same thing. This is very contrary to what we ordinarily think. Thought is ordinarily thought to be different than sensory experience. Subjective is held to be different than objective. Personal reactivity is held to be different than event that is being reacted to. All of these complexities are held to be juxtaposed with regard to each other in various complex ways that creates the conundrums of, well, what am I going to do? How am I going to position myself? What are my strategies? What am I doing? Should I criticize how I'm thinking or feeling? Should I wonder how I'm behaving? Should I behave differently? Am I supposed to be this way? Am I supposed to be that way? As if there was some personal volition or personal orientation that is somehow separate from the milieu, separate from the situation that can somehow orient to it in separate ways. But this is not so. Everything is one event. Your thoughts, your motivations, your reactivity, all of these things that seem to be volitional, seem to be personal, are themselves the spontaneously appearing energy. Let's call it whatever this is, whatever this actuality is that is here. And it's all exactly the same value. It's all exactly the same thing, different frequencies of the same thing. It's all real, it's all true, but there's only one it. There's not a lot of it's. This is radiant presence. What is here is radiant presence. It is what it is. I call it radiant presence, which is in many ways a pretty clear way to designate it. But what it is, of course, is beyond name, it's beyond definition, it's beyond definability. And yet its nature is such that it is very definable. And we're all very familiar with that. We define our experience as including our body, as including the world, as including other people, as including all the objects, as including all the events, all of the actions and interrelationships of all the people and events and complexities and things, all this incredible elaboration, which is defined in my intelligence and imagination, in experiencing this actuality that's here, the actuality of your experiential field, the actuality of radiant presence. But these definitions are all inaccurate. None of them are true. None of them actually apply. And what's worse is that the overall implication of what these definitions are, the nature of what you define yourself to be, the nature of what you define the world to be, and the implications of problems and difficulties that is implicit in these definitions, creates a flavor of limitation, of frustration, of incompleteness, of failure, of suffering. And the actuality of radiant presence itself, which is undefinable, and in its undefined nature, has a drastically different implication. Its implication is one of fullness, completeness, lusciousness, beauty, profound meaningfulness, hyperintelligence, and yet they are the same thing, except that radiant presence is true and your defined world is not true. It's inaccurate. It's a comedy of errors. It's kind of almost true, but in that almost is completely untrue. It's a lot like if I said, well, what does the United States look like? And I sort of, if I looking down on it from the air, and I sort of drew the outline, with Texas sticking down and Florida sticking down and all this, and the border with Canada and the West Coast and East Coast, and said, well, that's the shape of the United States. Well, kind of, but it isn't really. When you start looking a lot closer, the United States is much, much, much more complex than that, much more intricate. And then you look really close, you look at the grains of sand along the beach, and the water's rising and falling, the grains of sand are shifting. So what shape it is at any given moment is different than the shape in the next moment, and it never repeats itself. So where's the border go? Well, it's approximately the way the map draws it, but approximately is a way of saying it's not that. What it really is what it really is. And what that is can't be said because it's infinitely complex, infinitely detailed, and infinitely dynamic, and it never repeats itself. So the United States has no shape, or whatever shape it has is already gone. It has absolutely zero duration. Any condition that is a certain way now is already something else. Now has no duration. Change is instantaneous. Change is absolutely constant. This is just some of the obvious ways in which our definitions are inaccurate. They're oversimplifications. They don't include the actual nature of experience in what they hold it to be. And experience is all that is here. So the actual nature of experience is the only thing that is true. These definitions are not true. They're approximations. They're oversimplifications. They're inaccurate. Reality is made of specifics, not generalizations. You know, your experience looks exactly the way it looks right now, completely 100% with inconceivable infinite precision. But your approximation is, well, it's sort of like this, sort of like that. There's no sort ofs. Reality doesn't do sort ofs. Reality does this. This right here, right now, always. And the nice thing is, if you look at this, it's astounding. It's amazing. It's beautiful. It's luscious. It's rich. It's profound. It's beyond space and time. It's eternal. And you are all of it. You are not a part of it. You're not some little vulnerable subsystem that is dependent upon some vastness. There's nothing present but this continuous field of being. So if you exist at all, which is self-evidently the case, then you are this field of being. The world is this field of being. The totality of reality is this field of being. So you are the totality of reality? Well, sure, I mean, all the great religions have said this, but it sounds like a theoretical abstraction, Yes, you are Brahman, you are the absolute. I mean, that sounds great on paper, but what they're really talking about is just this simple fact of the presence of your experiential field, which is extremely concrete. It's concrete, it's actual, it's undeniable, it's self-verifyingly true. So, I invite you to check it out. Look for yourself and see the way that this is so. It's undeniably so. And the implications of this being the way it is are absolutely wonderful, especially by contrast with the paltry few crumbs of enjoyment that our normal worldview leaves us. Thought is small, ideas are small, beliefs are small, and the implications that they have are small, which leads to the idea and belief in a small world and a small you, living a small life with limitations and suffering and problems. But they're all just thoughts. It's all fake news. It's literally fake news. The real story is this presence, this radiant presence, this actuality that alone is. It is as it is. How it is completely obvious, but unthinkable, undescribable. And as soon as the mind starts thinking and describing, you create these little limitations, these little disappointing, problematic versions of yourself and the world and situations and so on. None of which actually exist. They aren't even real. And yet we feel as if they're real if you believe in them. And then there's the emotional reactivity of that, and the suffering, and then you're off and running in the normal human situation, which doesn't exist. It's a fantasy. Humanity is a fantasy. What is this. This is not a fantasy. This is not a concept. This is absolutely real. There's nothing here but this. And that's it. You can't say anything true about it. But you can know it. You do know it. You can fully, deeply appreciate it, drink of it, know that you are it, know its nature and come to see that it is your nature and enjoy the luscious, wonderful implications of this. And it's right here, right now, always. To say it's available is absurd. There's nothing else available. Thought and ideas and belief can happen, but they're never true, never true. And when you're caught in thought and beliefs and ideas, simply look at what's present. Look at experience itself. Feel the presence, feel the texture of experience, the texture of color, the texture of thought, the texture of sensation, the texture of being, the texture of you-ness. It's always right here, right now, always infinitely rich and satisfying and never describable. The important thing, the only thing, is this that is right here, just exactly as it is. Nothing that we can say about it is accurate. All of this discussion is perhaps relevant, but not precisely true. What I call radiant presence cannot be described. It cannot be communicated. It doesn't need to be, because it's right here. It's complete. You are it. You have all of it. It's not hidden. It is entirely itself. Nothing other than it is here. It is doing itself. It does everything. There isn't everything to do. It is everything. And so in doing itself, it's doing everything. It's containing everything. It's the substance of everything. It's the motive force of everything. It's the completeness of everything. It itself, from the point of view of how we ordinarily think of our lives, it itself has absolutely wonderful characteristics and wonderful nature, which cannot be said precisely, but which, by contrast with what we're used to thinking that we are, that this is, are wonderful and astounding. It's absolute completeness. It's continually being in a finished condition, not needing anything, nothing missing, nothing requiring adjustment or fixing. It's always in a state of absolute equilibrium, absolute repose. It's always perfectly balanced, resting itself. It's always completely open and unlimited, uncontained, unblocked, unimpeded, with no resistance, nothing to resist it. In itself, absolutely, powerfully expresses its full nature without limitation or impediment. The important thing is to let yourself know the way that this is true. And this is done by feeling it, by seeing it, by recognizing that you do know it. You do know experience. You do know consciousness. You do know intelligence. And you do know presence. You know all these things most intimately. Just let yourself rest in this and recognize, notice the completeness and the absoluteness that this is completely and utterly so. It is completely and utterly exactly as it is. Radiant presence is a felt presence. To experience means to feel that it's felt by consciousness. It's being engaged with absolute intimacy, absolute completeness. And this is palpable, this textural presence experience has a texture, you could say. Experience has a flavor, you could say. And letting yourself recognize how intimately familiar you are with this flavor, with this texture, enables you to recognize recognize yourself, recognize what this is. Just feeling presence, feeling being, feeling experience. Welcome. Tonight I'd like to talk about an interesting aspect of yoga, quite an important one, which is choice. Or another way to put that is integrity. In yoga, as a result of your experience with your spiritual inquiry, with looking into your experience, after a certain period of time, you accumulate a really profound feeling, a profound knowing of this richness, this transcendental nature that is present. And at the same time, you have present your habitual historic orienting to your experience in terms of identifying with your personality, identifying with your human role, and being, invested in your persona. And at a certain point, it becomes important to exercise choice, to choose to orient to what you know to be true from your yoga deliberately, as opposed to the lazy line of least resistance of just letting yourself orient to your persona as you usually do, as you always have. This is a lot like if you've ever, those of you that have ever quit smoking or quit drinking or, changed your diet successfully, anything like that, it's a matter of taking a stand and committing to it. Because you reach a point where if you do this successfully, you reach a point where you value that. You specifically and deliberately choose, I choose this over that. And you take that stand, you stay with that in your integrity. And the degree to which you're successful in doing this is the degree to which you do take that kind of a stand. In yoga, this is very useful and important to do just so, because it's quite easy to have spiritual experience. It's quite easy to recognize reality and to see this amazing condition that's here. But it's much harder to let go of unreality. It's harder to relax and let go of the line of least resistance of orienting to your normal persona and your human role, and being concerned about your various things. You're concerned about your health or your social status or your financial situation or whatever sorts of things that traditionally you hold important. And to really take a stand, to really say, no, I see this, I know this is true, this is valuable to me. This is where I choose to invest my value. This is where I choose to invest what I hold dear, what I hold important. And so that becomes the primary orientation, quite deliberately. And this doesn't mean that you're not going to fall off the wagon periodically and all that. That's not the point. The point is to deliberately come down, to rather than sort of have a laissez-faire, sort of a lazy approach to spirituality. Well, yeah, I'm checking out all this stuff and it's really pretty cool. And, I'll just go along and keep checking it out. And eventually, once I've checked it out enough, maybe something will happen. It's like, no, I've seen this. I know that this is here. I know this is profound. I know it's true. So, I'm gonna walk the talk. I'm gonna take a stand and say, this is true for me. This is my truth. I own this. I will live this, and to really stay with that, to really orient to that. I often say that reality is made of specifics, not about generalities. And I'd like to look a little more closely into what I mean by that. What is here is your experience, and your experience is exactly the way it happens to be, as it happens to be, which of course is always right here, right now. Generalities, categories, for example, I could say, I'm looking at a bunch of your faces now. So that's a category, that's a generalization. If I look at what I'm really seeing, I'm seeing very specific patterns of color and light. That they are faces is a generalization. The specifics that I'm seeing, that I'm calling faces, is exactly the experience that I'm seeing in this instant. Even that it is patterns of color and light is another generality. It is this that is being experienced. Even that it is experienced is a generality. It's just this. It's precisely this that is. This that is here, this that is now. All of these generalities are arguments. They exist in imagination. For example, and most of these arguments of these generalities are based upon degrees of similarity, degrees of sameness. So I can say, I'm seeing a bunch of faces, and I can call them faces because they arguably have degrees of similarity in terms of their patterning or their shape, what have you, compared to something that I'm not calling faces. But this degrees of similarity is similarities of absolute difference. Because if I look at each of your supposed faces, it's entirely and utterly and completely different from anyone else's face. And my experience of your face is different in the next instant. So it's different from itself in the instant, and it's different from anyone else, from any other face, absolutely. So the argument of similarity is a statement about something that's absolutely different. It's an argument. If I take two things and I start making lists of the way they're similar, I can also start making another list of the ways they're dissimilar. And no matter how long I go, the list would be the same length. So no matter how many similarities I find between two things, I can find just as many dissimilarities forever. So it's an argument. It's an argument that they're similar. It's not a fact that they're similar. The fact is that experience alone exists, and experience is exactly the way it is, which is always absolutely unique. Look at this uniqueness. Look at the fact that this right now has never been this way. It has never appeared this way. Every single thing you're experiencing right now is completely and utterly different than anything you've ever experienced. You've never experienced the configurations of this moment. And again, you can argue similarity. Well, sure, but I'm in my living room and it looks pretty much the same way as it usually looks, as it looked last night, say. But pretty much the same, again, is an argument. The actual experience, exactly what I'm seeing, is exactly the brightness and the light and the angle that I'm seeing it from and everything whatsoever is utterly and completely different. So this alone exists, and it is exactly what it is. It's exactly the way that it is. And it is completely ungraspable. Anything you can say about it is an argument which exists in imagination. Even that it is experience. What does that mean? Experience is a fantasy. Color is a fantasy. Light is a fantasy. Faces are a fantasy. Space and time are fantasies. What does that leave you with? This. This is reality. This is actuality. This is what I call radiant presence. This, that is. This, that is here now. Look for yourself and see that this is true. See that this is actual, this is real, this is present, and nothing whatsoever, nothing whatever other than this can be found. Anyway, I recommend you explore this for yourself. It will reveal to you the naked absolute reality. And seeing this quite clearly, and seeing that there's nothing but this, that you are this, that everything is this alone exists, is realization, is the goal of yoga. This is reality. This is radiant presence. When I say this, I'm not talking about my this, I'm talking about your this. Say this that is here. Feel the presence of your experience. This presence that you're feeling is reality, is radiant presence. This is the absolute. Just feel it. It's very simple. It's very obvious. It's normal. It's just your being, the being of your world, the being of your universe, the being of your experience. Your experiential field is radiant presence, and nothing else exists. So feel the presence of your experiential field. Feel the presence of your experience right here. You're here, not my here. I have my here, but you check out your here. Notice how this presence that you feel this presence, right? I mean, it's very obvious. The experience is present. Reality is present. This moment is present. Feeling this presence, notice how all the myriad qualities that appear are nothing other than this presence. They're embedded in it. All of the infinite flavors and textures that appear, all are flavors of this presence. They are nothing other than this. They have no autonomous existence. This is the totality, simply feeling this, feel this presence that is right here, right now. There's nothing greater than this. There's nothing beyond this. This is what all the spiritual traditions mean by the absolute, mean by Brahman, mean by Shiva, mean by God. all these extreme, this extreme absolute, the top of the pyramid for everything is nothing other than this very presence of your experience right here, right now. That's the absolute truth. Let yourself notice this. Just feel it and explore it. As you feel it, it shows you what it is. Simply feeling it, you feel what it is. You feel its infinity. You feel its absolute continuous nature. You feel its absolute presence. You feel its absolute dynamism and instantaneity and spontaneity, the way it continually presents with ever new patterns and information seemingly, and yet it never changes, it never goes anywhere. It's always just this presence. It's right here. So simply letting yourself feel this that is yoga. It is realization. There's nothing beyond it. Don't make the mistake of diminishing it. Don't make the mistake of saying, yeah, it's only my experience. It's only, being. This is truly the absolute, and it is completely completely worthy of absolute appreciation, absolute honoring. Trying to convey or talk about the nature of reality is impossible. Anything we can talk about, anything we can say, anything we can designate, any concept partializes and creates an apparent separate entity or component. And reality itself has no parts, it has no component, it has no aspects. So, we can talk about consciousness, you can talk about awareness, you can talk about appearances, you can talk about, and all these different things, these different apparent aspects or components of this. And yet it's befuddling and ultimately confusing because none of that actually exists as such. There are no parts or pieces that can be found. There's just this entirety. Now, it has a great many interesting properties, you might say. But again, as soon as you designate or specify those properties to try to talk about them, you, by implication, logically, you create the notion that there is this thing, there is this property or this principle. And then again, you end up with a laundry list of principles or properties that supposedly apply, and then you're looking for. And ultimately, you have to jettison that. Ultimately, you have to let all that go because none of it is really like that. This that is here is like absolutely nothing but itself. It has virtually no properties. There's a statement for you. It has no properties. And that's actually a very powerfully true statement, as strange as it sounds. Of course, that sort of leaves us with not a lot to talk about. On the other hand, we can talk about anything because anything we talk about is it exactly. The challenge is to recall that what we say is not it. What we say is a jumping off point for noticing the way in which this itself is utterly beyond, even if somehow reminiscent of what we are saying, what we are talking about. I think one of the most cardinal aspects of this is its unresolvability. The fact that you cannot pin down exactly what or exactly how anything whatsoever is. So if you're looking for anything, you can't find it, which again is a very strange principle. It's a very strange notion. But if you look sensitively and subtly at the reality that is present here, you will discover the truth of that. You can't find anything. Everything is an infinity of qualities, of instability, of dynamism. Nothing is stable or steady or simple enough to be found. The great secret of yoga, the secret of spirituality, is that your experience is everything. Nothing exists but your experiential field. Once you see that, once you understand that, everything falls into place, everything becomes completely clear. Spirituality, God, the absolute is not something out there that you need to get to. It's right here. It's this presence that is your experiential field. And you are not in your experiential field, you are your experiential field. The body appears in the field, other people appear in the field, all these apparitions appear in the field, and you are your body in the sense that you are everything, but you are the field fundamentally. The entire field of your experience, the bubble of your experience, is your embodiment. It is your presence. It is you. This here is not me. This is me. That, feeling the truth of that, seeing the simple, obvious fact of that, explains everything, and it puts in context all of the most profound spiritual teachings in all the traditions that you'll encounter. Yoga is very immediate. Realization is very immediate. Spirit is very immediate. It's not something that is elaborated and involves a lot of finding something or changing something or getting to something. It's just simply noticing what is right here, what this is, what you are. It is what it is. It is as it is. It is as it has been. Always, it will always be the same. It does not change. It continually expresses its own apparent dynamism and it expresses its own apparent unfoldment, let's say. But it itself, what it is, does not change. It is always exactly as it is. It is always the absolute. It is always the supreme. It is always God. It is always radiant presence. So the real question is, this experience, your experience right there, or you would say right here, I would say right here, my here, you're there, is reality, is the totality, is the infinite continuum of the absolute. And so simply noticing what it is, noticing the way it is what it is, answers all questions, reveals everything. And you see how everything works, how everything fits in to this actuality. And you'll discover that you are vastly other than you have been led to believe you are by consensus reality thinking and normal human philosophy and materialism and so on. This that is present is absolute reality. There is nothing lesser. There are no lesser realities. There's no small self. There's no little world. There's no normalcy. There's just this. And this is the absolute. This is the supreme. What experience looks like is always what it looks like. What experience appears to be in realization is exactly the same thing as experience appears to be in delusion. The most spiritually thick, unrealized beginner is experiencing their experience in exactly the same way as the most subtly, absolutely realized being. One and the same. There is no increase of clarity. There is no increase of anything. What there is a recognition of the way that it actually is, as opposed to the substituting of heavy-handed interpretations that tend to distract one from noticing and appreciating the actual condition as it actually is. In yoga, the simplest, most direct approach is simply feel being, feel this presence. It shows you what it is. Feel it directly, non-verbally. Feel it texturally. Experience is a textural presence. Experience is felt. Experience is drunk. Experience is a richness. Feel this richness, feel this texture. Explore what it is by knowing it, by experiencing it, by feeling it, which is already all you've ever been doing. What it is cannot be said, cannot be thought, but it doesn't need to be said or thought because you have it, it's right here. It is this that it is. What does presence feel like? What is the texture of presence? What is the texture of being? What's the flavor of being? Feel this, explore this, feel what it is. And you'll find you've always been an expert in it. You already know everything there is to know about it. Yoga is very simple. Yoga asks just one question. What are you really experiencing when you're experiencing whatever your mind is telling you you're experiencing? So my mind may be telling me, I'm looking at a computer, I'm sitting in a room, I'm talking to people who are apparently on the other end of the computer, appearing these little squares on my computer and so on. And I'm in a body, and so happened an hour ago, and I mean just the whole narration. The mind tells me the whole narration. And since I have a lifetime of indoctrination in this, I readily believe this. I readily hold this to be true. It feels as if it's true. It feels as if, yes, I am here. I'm obviously in this room. I'm obviously talking on a computer to a bunch of people. All this is very clear and obvious. This is the mind's version of things. But what is actually being experienced? What is actually being experienced right now? And it does not align with the mind's version. It does not align with the mind's narration. And this difference right there between the mind's version of things and the actual experience is where yoga works. Yoga is, well, I'm highly trained. I'm extremely skilled at ignoring experience, at ignoring what I'm actually experiencing and substituting my highly polished mental version of it. I do it without thinking it, effortlessly. It's just totally spontaneous. But at the same time, actual experience is present. And this is the great opportunity of yoga. This is the doorway that you enter into yoga through, this doorway of the presence of your actual experience. What is experience right now? What is really being experienced? How is it being experienced? What is its nature? What is its message? What are its qualities? And it is fundamentally and drastically different than the mind's narrated version. This right here is the entire crux of yoga, the entire crux of realization. Realization, enlightenment, and all of this is nothing more than realizing what experience actually is. And it's fundamentally easy because you already fully are engaged with it. You already fully know what it is, even though you're maybe so deeply indoctrinated in your mental version of it that it's difficult to recognize. But since you already are experiencing it, you have the direct experience is always available to you to look at, to explore, to discover, or remember anyway. Let's say recognize its actual nature of what's actually being experienced, and this is where one discovers that you're not what you thought you were. Your world isn't what you thought it was. You discover the richness, the fullness, the absolute completeness, the absolute transcendental nature of what this is, what you are, that is revealed by the actual quality of real-time experience. This is yoga. This is radiant presence, right here. This it is here. This is the richness, the fullness that everything whatsoever exists within is embedded in. You could think of it as this fullness alone exists, and all things that seem to appear are nothing but this fullness. Very much in the same way that when you're asleep dreaming, the dreaming alone exists, and everything that seems to appear is the dreaming itself. And this that is being. It is the isness of this, is the radiant presence, is its fullness, is its completeness, and it alone exists. There's nothing else. It is the only thing that is here, that is happening, that is you, that is the universe, that is reality. This amazing vastness of presence, of miraculous shining forth. There's nothing else. There's really nothing else. And of course, this is very foreign to normal human worldview. But guess what? The normal human worldview is wrong. Radiant presence is what there is. Being is what there is. Reality is what there is. And yoga is simply the process of coming to recognize that this is true, without changing anything, without doing anything, without accomplishing anything. Simply noticing that your experience is a fullness that is everything, that contains everything, and that you are entirely nothing other than your experience. The full field of your being is you. Your body appears in you, the universe appears in you, the whole human race appears in you, history appears in you, galaxies appear in you. You're what's here, and all of that is just little dancing patterns within you. Yoga is conscious intelligence exploring experience. Now, this is already what's always happening. Your experience is the inherent consciousness, which is pure intelligence, exploring itself as what you might call your experience. This is not something you do or you cannot do. It's what is inherently happening. It's the inherent nature of this actuality, of this reality itself, that this is so. This is what it is. This is what it consists of. Your experience itself is the spontaneous, inherent self-exploration of reality by reality. Now, yoga of radiant presence is simply noticing that this is so and participating with it on that level. By contrast with imagining that you exist as a separate individual and there's something you need to do or not do that has something to do with yoga. In actuality, what you are is already doing the yoga. It's just a matter of noticing that that is the case. So this intrinsic presence of the spontaneous awareness that is already experiencing your experience unstoppably. You can't do it more, you can't do it less, you can't start it, you can't stop it. It's already happening. Just feel this. Feel the fact of this present awareness that is just always here. Whether you can be clear, and awake, and the awareness is here. You can be, intoxicated and falling asleep, and the awareness is here. You can be in deep sleep, and the awareness is here. You can be in a dream, the awareness is here. The awareness is invariable. It's just always experiencing. The hallmark of experience is this inherent awareness experiencing. Now, noticing this is noticing what you are, noticing what this actually is. The true you is this experiencing of experience, this spontaneous consciousness exploring experience. And it has, like I say, it has nothing to do whatsoever with what the individual you, the human you, is doing or not doing, succeeding or failing, having clarity or having confusion, being lost in confusion, or stripping yourself down from interpretations into relaxing into direct experience. On the other hand, if you do find a way to relax into the fact of direct experience and notice this constant background and actually foreground fact of the inherent awareness experiencing itself, then you get to really enjoy and participate in the miraculous event that this is, the wonder that this is, the transcendental the transcendental event that this is, which is the goal of yoga. So yoga is not to do yoga. Yoga is to discover that yoga is unstoppably already being done, and to recognize what is doing it, at which point you recognize your true self, you recognize your true nature, and the nature of actuality itself. What is immediately up close and obvious is the mystery. I've often say that reality is made of specifics, not generalities. And the specific of what is most intimately and immediately present, the presence of the experience of your senses, the presence of your thought, the presence of your feeling of yourself, all of this that is so palpable, so obvious, is absolutely mysterious. It's absolutely unfathomable. There's nothing whatsoever can be determined about it. What it is, how it is, that it is even. We become numb to this, we become blind to this because it's so constantly present, and we take it for granted. Consciousness gets a kind of a blasé numbness to what seems to be always present. Consciousness is more drawn to when there's a change or a divergence that stands out. Anything that's always there, it sort of recedes and becomes, it acquires a quality of sort of a lifelessness or an unimportance. But in actuality, this that is most immediately present, this that is most obvious, is the most profound mystery. This is the mystery of radiant presence. Radiant presence is not some mystery that's behind the scenes or somewhere out there that is somehow behind, underneath the normalcy doing it. This that is right here is the radiant presence. This immediacy is the radiant presence. Everything that is most immediate, most obvious in your experience, everything whatsoever, is this absolute mystery of radiant presence, this absolute mystery of divine being, of transcendental being, that alone exists. It's interesting how backwards human understanding is, where what we don't know is what we think we know, and what we know is what we think we don't know. It looks like it might be something being perceived, and it looks like there might be some perceiving principle, but actually nothing like that can be found. It simply is. There is nothing seeing anything, and there's nothing being seen. It's just this presence, mysterious presence. That makes no sense. This makes no sense. It's entirely irrational, entirely illogical. It cannot be structuralized or sorted out or explained or analyzed in any way whatsoever. It seems to be self-engaged. It seems to be intensely involved with itself. There's an intensity of engagement, of investment, seemingly, a participation, a self-participation of this with itself. And this we think of as our experience, this we think of as our being, our life. What it is can't be said. It doesn't need to be said because you have it, you are it, this is it. Simply recognizing that this is so, that this is the way that it is, completely releases you from all of the problems that seem to arise by the implications of what you're used to thinking of it as being. You're used to thinking of it as being you, your life, your situations, your difficulties, your challenges, all of that. In actuality, it's just this instantaneous point event, this miraculous being that is entirely itself, is entirely doing itself, entirely, exclusively containing itself, with none of the intricacy and absolute infinite detail of all of the seeming complexity of the apparent patterning being omitted or negated. It is all of this. It is this. This is what it is. What it isn't is matter. What it isn't is separate objects. What it isn't is an objectively existing space, an objectively existing world. What it isn't is time stretching back to the past and into the future. What it is just exactly this, and no more about it can be said. Of course, we can say anything we want about it. There's nothing else to talk about whatsoever, but it will never be captured in words or ideas. But from the point of view of yoga, it can be recognized. This can recognize itself. And this is what they call realization. This is the farthest it can go into achievement is to recognize itself, which is not any different in actuality from not recognizing itself. It's exactly the same condition. But there's a side effect that when it recognizes itself, there's this wonderful ability to appreciate the richness and the subtlety and the completeness and the absolutely sacred transcendental nature of this being that you are, this being that this is. And this recognition comes just from feeling it, exploring what it actually is by being with the presence of it without preconceptions. Simply feeling this experiencing, feeling this presence, this being. That's right here, right now. it has a flavor, it has a texture, it has a nature. It's scintillating with intelligence, with meaningfulness. And this is obvious. This becomes very apparent um, as you let yourself feel this nature, explore it. One of the essential aspects of unfoldment um, that one encounters as one matures in yoga is um, living with the coexistence of multiple contradictory dimensions of experience. Within experience, if you assess what it is clearly, you'll notice that there are many different coexistent perspectives simultaneously. And these perspectives are often very contradictory. There can be non-spatial perspectives present. There can be spatial perspectives of sensory experience. You're seeing something at the same time there's some vague feelings of something, or there's other experience occurring within, let's say, frameworks that are not spatial or not related to the sensory experience simultaneously, not strung together into the same narrative. Experience is this way intrinsically, and it's contradictory to the ordinary human tendency where we want to collapse it, that we want to have a dominant perspective. We want to know, I want to be focused here. So we censor the aspects of experience, the dimensions of experience that don't seem to be applicable to what our supposed focus is at that time. Or, we're trying to meditate, and so we're doing whatever we think that is, and then there's other dimensions floating around, and we're trying to censor those or repress those or whatever. But as one matures in yoga, one learns to not deal with these different dimensions as if they're mutually exclusive, not try to take sides and choose one dimension over another, but to relax and be open with the coexistence of all of these different dimensions. And one exists in many different dimensions simultaneously, most of which are not particularly spatial, most of which are not oriented to sensory experience, and all of which are quite different from each other in terms of their focus or their emphasis or their nature or their dynamism or the nature of what you are in these different dimensions in terms of your let's say, your seeming subjective nature or your subjective perspective in these dimensions and so on. So noticing this and learning to relax within this is an essential part of, let's say, the more advanced stages of yoga. This, what is right here, right now, is the absolute. It doesn't have a name, doesn't have a description. Throughout history, people have put all sorts of names and words and ideas on this absolute. Called it God, called it the Atman, called it Shiva, called it, Parabrahman, called it all these various different names and different traditions. Called it the void. And it's not important what it's called, and it's not important how you think of it, because it's unthinkable, and it has no name. It's merely this actuality that is. You know it supremely. You've never known anything else. You know it most intimately. You are it. But because its nature is so subtle, and because of the human tendency to collapse things down to concepts which are incapable of grasping what this is, people across the board have a completely inaccurate idea about what this is, about what you are, about what your situation is, about what is happening here. The only way to see what this is to see it directly in its own terms, outside of concepts, outside of description, outside of any kind of trying to determine it or map it or structuralize it. It is beyond space, it is beyond time. Yet space appears in it, perhaps time appears in it, perhaps to the extent that it does. It is an absolute unity, and it's absolutely infinitely differentiated simultaneously, which is inconceivable, that's irrational, and yet it is true. It is self, it is other, it is pure intelligence, it is pure meaningfulness. It's absolutely inclusive of itself, and it always exists in its absolute final condition. There's no development, it lacks nothing. There's nothing missing. There's nothing that needs to be added to it or be, have it be somehow nourished into or developed into. It presents as an infinite degree of information, which intelligence can try to collapse down into all sorts of patterns, which of course we're very familiar with. And these patterns become the ideas of the situations and entities and objects that we suppose to exist and we suppose constitute our reality, constitute our world, constitute our embodiment. But what's actually going on there is different. This has no embodiment but itself. The embodiment of radiant presence is radiant presence itself, is experience itself. Experience is your body. This isn't my body. I mean, it's a portion of it, but this is my body. The body is experience. The body is all form that appears. And the body is not separate in any way from reality, consciousness, intelligence. It's all one. It's one actuality. It's one phenomena. The challenge, the impediment to recognizing that this is so, recognizing the way that it's so, is our minds, is our analysis. We already think we know what it is, and we're wrong. Anything you think you know, you know what you are, you know what the world is, you know what anything is entirely and completely and utterly inaccurate. So the only way to see what is true is to somehow look around this preconception, look around this prejudice that the human mind has, to see what is actually here, to look at experience itself without concepts, without assessment. And at that point, it'll be quite clear what it is, and you'll be able to explore it. It will reveal itself in its nature. And of course, this is the path of yoga, is to look directly at experience and come to see what it is, let it show you what it is. And then you will come to know what you are, what all this is. Feel your being. Feel the being of yourself right now. Just feel the presence of this right here, right? You feel it. You're right here. You feel this being. It's very self-evident. This being that you're feeling is the soul being. It's the being of reality itself. It's the absolute being. It's not some subsidiary being or some lesser being that's somehow in some relationship to some greater or more fundamental being. This isness, the being, the presence that you feel right here, right now, just the being of your experience, the being of yourself, is the being of the absolute, the being of reality itself, the being of, you know, of radiant presence. You are not a small part of something in relation to something else bigger. You are not some small being, some subsidiary entity in relation to something greater. This presence, this being that is your being, is the soul being. It's one field, it's one continuum. Your being, your personal being, the being of your body, the being of your sense of yourself, the being of your personality, is the being of your experiential field, which is the being of reality itself, the being of the entirety, the being of the whole. So there's no subdivision. There's no sub-entity. There's no little you in relationship to some greater something. So feel this. So the immediacy of your being, when you feel I am, you're feeling the presence of reality itself. You're feeling the presence of the absolute, the presence of this continuum of reality, of existence, of being itself, the radiant presence that alone exists and excludes absolutely everything. Nothing is excluded from it whatsoever. And this is your being. So you are this. You are reality. You are the absolute. You are God. You are this being of reality itself that is right here, right now, inclusively, this field. So when you feel your own being, so the self-evidently, you're feeling the absolute reality. Let yourself, feel this. Let yourself know the way that this is so. It's right self-evident. You can't find anything else that is greater than you or that is beyond you. This being includes all being. This being is the being of the atmosphere, the being of the earth, the being of the human race, the being of, of the solar system, of the galaxy. It's this one being. It's this being is right here, right now, your being. This is the being. So, really let yourself feel this, let yourself appreciate this. It's not something you need to do anything about. You don't need to ramp it up or open to it or hold it to be true or anything like that. It just happens to be that way. It's that way whether you notice it or not. But you're free to notice it, and in noticing it, you get to participate in this incredibly powerful, awesome fact of this reality that you are, that you happen to be, that is the soul reality. You are is what the world is, and is what the totality of being is. And it's nothing other than this that is right here, right now. The presence of, the persistence of personal being, the persistence of individual being. Of course, when one begins spirituality, one is a human in one's life, struggling along or whatever, and one, for whatever reason, through whatever set of circumstances or experiences, comes to see that, wow, wait a minute, maybe there's more here. Let me look into this. Let me try to pursue this, explore this. And over the course of this investigation, there can be discovery. There can be amazing discovery and revelation. Wow, there's something really incredible here. There's an astounding being here, an astounding fact here that is utterly beyond the limitations of my understanding of my human nature, my human dimension, what have you, that sort of thing. And it can be easy to somehow to see the spirituality as moving from the individual being as a human being, as a schmo stuck in one's life, with the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, to try to go to this amazing, revelation that one has discovered, as if you're leaving one thing and going to another. And this is not the case. Through yoga, through spiritual investigation, we discover what this is, but it doesn't stop being what it always has been. It always has been what it is. As you discover what I call the radiant presence, this astounding, unified actuality that alone exists, that includes everything, this system of reality that is right here, right now. It includes completely and utterly the individual human being. It includes the life. It includes the details of interaction. It includes the personality with all its flaws and faults. It includes all of these aspects. And the way that it does that, the relationship between, let's say, the partialized personality, the partialized identity, and the full field of being is very interesting. It's like an inclusive spectrum. I think that the phenomenon that's called spiritual bypass, I don't really like that idea, but includes this idea of somehow leaving the personal identity, leaving the human perspective, and somehow going to this grander, fuller being that one discovers, as if the human perspective is somehow negated or canceled out or erased. And again, this is not the case. They coexist as a continuous spectrum. You are what you are on each level of perspective, which is the perspective on the same thing. So from a certain perspective, you're a human being in your life in a material situation. From another perspective, you are a transcendental presence of inconceivable, miraculous being. From another perspective, you are a field of dancing, complex energies, interweaving with each other, and so on and so forth. And there's an infinite degree of these various perspectives that one can discover experientially. And all the perspectives are true perspectives of the actuality, but none of them exist autonomously. None of them exist as a separate condition. They all are merely partialized views of this one continuum, this one inclusive spectrum of being that includes all of its levels, all of its various perspectives, you might say, which only exist as perspectives of observation rather than as definitive conditions that exist this condition and this condition and this condition that somehow coexist with each other. There's only the one condition, but it looks very, very different from the myriad different perspectives that it can be approached in experientially. This is present. This is, it has being. Presence is not an abstraction. It's not a philosophical notion. Presence is concrete. It's very felt actuality that is self-verifyingly here. That this is present, that your experience is present is not an abstraction. It's the sole fact. It's self-verifying truth. Presence is truth. Presence is actuality. Now, presence is very it has many aspects that we may not be familiar with. For example, I feel my body, the presence of my body, like the felt, the sense of feeling, the sense of touch, the feeling of the presence of my flesh and all of that, my heart beating and all of that. That's very concrete, that's very present. But that is appearing in presence, and presence exists outside of that. I feel the presence of my thought. And my thought is equally present, undeniably present, but it's a subtler texture of presence, but it's the same presence. Presence exists even outside of that. Presence exists everywhere in experience. Experience is presence. And presence can be extremely subtle. It exists outside the body, it exists outside the personality, it exists outside of the apparitional identity, the functional embodiment that we experience, that we're also familiar with. Presence is the fundamental fact. Presence is what is. Again, not as an abstraction, not as a philosophical notion, but as a supremely concrete, self-verifying actuality. Simply being aware of this presence, noting the nature of this presence, because this presence has quality. It is what it is, very specifically. It's not vague. It's very precisely, very concretely, this presence that is here. And letting yourself notice this, letting yourself discover this, enables you to discover the fundamental actuality of what you are, which we ordinarily overlook. In our normal human orientation, we're not concerned with presence, we're concerned with what is present. We want to know what's going on, what's my situation, what's my involvement, what do I like it or do I not like it, how can I improve it, all of these sorts of things, all of which are occurring within presence. But presence itself is like a clear window through which our life is being seen. And we're very interested in our life, but we're typically not very interested in the window. But the window is less like a window that we're looking at our life through. The window is more like the TV that our life consists of, or the dreaming that the dream of our life actually consists of. Presence is the only thing that's here. What appears within presence is merely presence itself in presenting as those qualities, as those textures, which I call the radiance. So this is radiant presence, this presence that obviously self-verifyingly, actually, concretely is right here, right now, always. And all of these apparitional qualities, which are continually appearing in it right here, right now, with absolute unresolvability, with absolute dynamism, with absolute unpredictability, with absolute spontaneity. And yet this presence is absolutely, continuously the ground of being right here, right now. It's the absolute. It is the fundamental truth. It is being itself. The presence is the presence of actuality, the presence of reality. If you want to become, spiritual, use spiritual metaphors, it's the presence of God, the presence of the Atman, the presence of the Supreme, the presence of Shiva. All of that hyperbole, all of that mythology is simply about the fact of this presence that is right here, right now. And letting yourself feel this presence, letting yourself explore this presence is turning into your fundamental being, the fundamental being of reality itself. And this is the root of yoga, and this is the root of discovering actuality, discovering the true being. What is this that is here? What is this that is right here? What is this reality? What is this actuality? What is this beingness? What is this world? What is this you, your presence of your experience? It's one thing. It's precisely what it is, but it has a very interesting property. It presents itself in an infinity of different perspectives, different ways it seems to be, with different implications, And the funny thing about this is that none of these ways of seeing it are truer or less true than any other way of seeing it. There's no way to see it in some final ultimate condition, and that compared to which other ways of seeing it would be lesser or smaller, diminished. It presents itself fully, but partially, in each of the ways it presents itself. And there's no hierarchy in terms of one being truer than the other, one being better than the other. On the other hand, for the purposes of yoga, for the purposes of spiritual exploration, in order to investigate what this is, investigate what you are, it's very useful to extricate yourself from whatever your habitual normalcy, your relatively normal perspective or range of perspectives is, and really try to see other perspectives, try to really explore the variety, the range, the richness of what this can present as, not because what you will find there is truer or more real than where you started from, but because it will shed light and perspective on what any perspective is. That all of these perspectives are perspectives of this one thing that itself, in its very nature, is utterly beyond being limited to any single perspective, the implications of any perspective, even as it presents as a perspective, or this vast range of perspectives that it does. So it's a very strange condition. It looks like something, however it looks, and it is that, but it's vastly more than that at the same time. So for spiritual exploration, in order to discover what this is, discover what you are, it's important to get out of your normalcy and really explore this actuality, explore your experience, to try to learn more about it, let it show you what it is from a vast different range of perspectives, and that way you kind of triangulate on it, on its actual nature, its actual flavor. But then having done so, when you see what this is, then you relax, because at that point you know perfectly well, you know with self-verifying certainty, that it doesn't matter what perspective it presents in, so you can relax and let yourself drift into whatever your natural inclination, your natural karmic orientation tends to be, and just sit with it that way. And that's perfectly well and good. That's a wonderful way to explore the absolute. It's a wonderful way to participate in the dance of radiant presence. So this is it's an interesting aspect of this that may be somewhat counterintuitive. In sort of simplistic or superficial spirituality, it can be easy to have the idea that, the normal limited perspective is somehow lesser. It's a second-class citizen, and you're trying to get to some superior, greater, enhanced, truer view of things. But in actuality, that's not quite the case. It's not really like that. And of course, this becomes clear, and you discover the way that it is so over the course of your investigation. This is the miracle. This is reality. This that is here. I call it radiant presence, but that's just a name. And it is nothing but pure miracle. Nothing whatsoever can be said about it. Everything that we say about it is silly. We talk about interpretations. We talk about direct experience. We talk about, all this stuff we're talking about here. It's all complete silliness. Anything whatsoever that we say is not true. The truth is this that is here. That's the only truth. And it has absolutely nothing whatsoever you can say and think about it that is true. It's a complete miracle. It's completely beyond, utterly, utterly beyond anything that makes any sense or can be thought or can be said, can be described. It is itself, it is doing itself. It is you are this. There's only this one fact, this one being that is absolutely concretely present right here, right now. This is the fact, it's the only fact, it's always been the only fact. And all these elaborations that we busy ourselves with our mind and our thoughts and our words, are all just silliness. This that is rich, it's vibrant, it's vital, it's living, it's profound, it's meaningful, it's just amazing. And this is the beginning and the end of it. You know, simply don't pretend otherwise. You know, simply, you know, you don't need to. You can let go of your arrogance of pretending to have a handle on it, pretending to know anything, pretending to be anything or do anything. Just this incredible, juicy fact, the fact of this being, is the only fact. It's the sole fact. It's this, it's right here. You don't need to make sense of it because you have it, you are it, nothing else whatsoever is true. Nothing else whatsoever exists. This is reality, right here. The presence of your experience is reality. Feel the presence of your experience. Notice how this presence is not an abstraction. It's not a concept. It's a self-verifying, undeniable actuality. It's being, it's isness. Is, this is not, someone can come up to you and say, oh, there is no being, and you laugh at them because it's not an abstraction, it's not an assertion or an argument, it's a self-verifying actuality. The presence, this presence of being is the great unification. It is the oneness. This being is your being. This being is the being of the universe. This being is the being of God, the absolute, the self. All being is this one being. All presence is this one presence. And absolutely everything is unified in this presence right here, right now, your presence. Nothing, you can find nothing but this presence. This presence is the unification, the inclusiveness of all reality. And it's actual, it's immediate, it's right here, right now. It's yourself. If you feel, well, where am I? What am I? You are this presence, the presence of your being, the presence of this being. You know, this being, your being, the world's being, the absolute's being, reality's being. It's just this one being. It's just this simple being, this simple actuality that's right here, right now. Always right here, right now. In noticing this being, feeling this being, you are one with the very core, the very essence of reality. And of course, you are one with this, even if you aren't feeling it, because you're always feeling it. You may not be recognizing it. But in this recognition, you are recognizing, you are opening your orientation of yourself up to the fundamental core actuality of reality itself. Now, it may not seem like much. I mean, you know, we take it for granted. Sure, being is, of course this is, you know, sure, this is, my experience is. But that doesn't diminish it in any way. That doesn't make it any less of a miracle. That doesn't make it any less of the absolute. If you study it, if you are looking at it with, you know, with great immediacy, with great intimacy, with great sensitivity, you will discover this fundamental fact of this absolute exclusiveness of reality itself that is right here, right now. This is the goal of spirituality, simply this being, and its nature as the inclusiveness, the unification of everything and anything. This that is right here is radiant presence. The presence of your being, the presence of your experience, right here where you are. This is reality. This is radiant presence. One of the more interesting aspects of this, and one of the more useful aspects of this to notice for the purposes of yoga, for the purposes of investigating what this is, what you are, is the way that it always spontaneously is opening, eternally opening. If you look at your experience, you'll notice that right away it changes. Right away it opens to something new. It opens to something different. Now, even though this is fairly obvious, we may not attend to this very much or pay much attention to it, because ordinarily our attention is skipping around a lot when we're busy doing our activities or in the course of our day. But if you sit quietly and just looking at your experience, something that's relatively calm and stable and not changing much, you'll notice right away there's this continual opening into newness, this continual departure of what it seemed to be an opening into a new perspective, a new set of qualities, range of qualities. We call this the flow of time. But this quality is very interesting. It enables you to be with the dimensionality of radiant presence, the way that it endlessly opens to new and fresh dimensions, never repeating itself. You never get back to exactly the same experiential perspective you had once. It always it's on forever, continually opening. This continual, endless opening is the radiance. It's the shining forth of experiential characteristics. And the presence is the presence of this eternal opening, of this constant opening that always happens beyond time. It happens right here, right now, ceaselessly, and with absolute steadiness, with absolute invariability. This endless opening into new dimensions, new perspectives. And simply becoming aware of this, simply resting in this opening, just, you might say, sitting feeling time pass, but it's a little more sophisticated than that, a little more subtle than that, really coming into being with this continual change, this continual shift of dimension, this continual spontaneous, effortless development, evolution of perspective, of these dimensions of experience that continually present themselves, continually open. This endless flow, this endless opening that doesn't go anywhere, doesn't come from anywhere, and yet within itself, it ceaselessly, spontaneously is doing this shining forth of newness, of ever new revelation, ever new aspects of its own nature. So this can be a very enjoyable as well as powerful mode of engagement with your experience for the purposes of yoga. Just being with and noticing, relaxing into this endless opening, and to discover it's very entertaining, very surprising, very rich and enjoyable to just be with this amazing flow as the apparitional, the experiential perspective, the experiential characteristics ceaselessly develop and open and move into newness where they've never been before, presenting new, boldly going where no one has ever gone before, to borrow from Star Trek. Yoga is the exploration of your experience in order to investigate what it is, to investigate what reality is. What is this that is here? Now, typically one starts with a powerful sense of normalcy. One starts with a very strong default orientation to what one's experience is. It feels very natural and normal and objectively true. And the course of spiritual investigation, spiritual inquiry, yoga, is to push that envelope, to sort of look beyond one's normalcy, look beyond one's habitual orientation, to try to have more of a sense of what else is going on, or to see beyond to see the limitations of that orientation. Now, initially, in terms of investigation, people usually go into sort of amorphousness, into deep meditation, formlessness, trying to find bliss, trying to find some transcendental vagueness or generality, trying to find the nirvikalpa samadhi, which is, samadhi, meditation without any form. And if as yoga progresses, there will probably be some degree of success in that. You'll have some sort of bliss, some sort of amazing experiences of, wow, this is incredible. Maybe you do some deep meditation, or do, become a bliss bunny and sort of find some amazing teaching and just sort of sit there and get all blissed out about it or whatever. And that's fine. That's sort of going in one direction from normalcy, sort of going from normalcy outwards, away from form, away from structure, let's say, relatively. But there's another direction too, which is the precision, the specific, the absolute detail of sensory experience, the detail of materiality, the detail of what we think of as objectively, materially, structurally true. Now, interestingly, the interpretive orientation of humans is this halfway between the actual detail of experience and the formlessness of experience. It doesn't exist in the detail of experience. It exists removed from that in a sort of an in-between area of fantasy. It's somewhat in touch with both other directions, but it does not actually sit with them as they are. Now, since most inquirers will already have some familiarity with trying to get out of this and have some degree of experience or success in that, with meditation or bliss or what have you, drugs, whatever sorts of things you do that really take you out of your normalcy, and it seemed to be wonderful. But then the problem with that approach, if you stop with that, is it leaves you with these two poles. You have the pole of your of your normalcy, which is relatively a problem, or stuck, or limited, or small, and then this other pole of all the wonderful release of the bliss, or the transcendental, or whatever. So the complete yoga, the thorough yoga, goes both directions. So you get out of your normalcy by going, by all means, explore the transcendental, explore the bliss, explore all the, the wild, formless deliciousness. But then go the other direction, and this is the most powerful leg of yoga. Go very, very, very precisely to the actual solidity and concrete nature of your experience. Be very, very precisely with exactly what you're experiencing, with your senses, with your mind, what have you. And in this, you will find the most powerful release, because the fantasy, the middle ground of interpretation, the fantasy of that is that the specifics is the jail, the specifics is the anchor, the specifics is what holds you back, and you want to get out of that. But when you discover that the specifics themselves are actually utterly transcendental, that's when you're gone. That's when there's absolutely nothing left. That's when you're in free fall. Now, the trick with the specifics is to disentangle them from interpretation. For example, I might ordinarily think, well, I'm sitting here looking at a computer. I'm not looking at a computer. I'm looking at experience that I'm calling a computer. I'm looking at the experience of a computer. There is no computer. The computer is a theory. The experience is the actuality. So there is no computer. There's the experience that I'm calling a computer. There is no hand. There's the experience I'm calling a hand, and so on. There's nothing present but experience. And experience, all of it, completely reveals the nature of radiant presence. It's infinity. It's unresolvability. It's instantaneous instability. The fact that in the instant, it's already something else. It has absolutely no duration whatsoever where it actually is the same. It's always different than itself, always spinning off from itself. And like we talked about last time, this continual opening, this continual flow of newness that is just endlessly changing. Even if you sit very still and very stably and try to have things not change as much as you can, be with not the things, but the experience of the things. Be with what you're actually experiencing, and you'll see in every precise detail this effervescent flow, this opening, this changing, this dynamism, and also the unresolvability of the unfathomable, richness of information that is present. So going this direction, going to the specifics and finding the nature of radiant presence right there, when you do that, that's called savikalpa samadhi, which is a samadhi with form. The deep, profound meditation, being with reality as the specifics, as the detail, as the form. So when you have both nirvikalpa samadhi and the savikalpa samadhi, then you're liberated. Isn't that nice? So I recommend this. And as I say, as spiritual seekers, most of us already have done the knee-jerk work with trying to get away from things, trying to transcend everything, trying to find that which is beyond, that which leaves everything behind. But how many people go in to find the doorway that is the detail of the concrete presence of reality? That's a door too, and that door opens to absolute infinity. This that is present right here, just this actuality of your being, the being of your experience, is the totality of reality. The whole thing, the complete show, just this that is right here. This radiant presence. It's very interesting in its nature. It is present. It is actual. It is manifest. It is undeniably and self-verifyingly. And what it is and the way it is, this radiant spectrum of qualities that appears, all the sensory qualities, the sensory information, mental qualities, subtler energy qualities, all of this is very interesting, a continuum. It exists as a full spectrum going from absolute delineated formfulness and specificity of the sensory realm, going up through, let's say, subtler degrees of form, into mental realms, and then into even subtler degrees of form, into subtle energy realms, and even to subtler energy realms that seem to be virtually nothingness by comparison with the sensory realm. And yet, it's all the same thing, it's all one continuous spectrum that simply looks the way that it looks, depending upon the perspective from which it's observed. So if you're with your sensory experience, you're fully with radiant presence. If you're with your subtler intuitive experience, say you're just feeling the presence of someone you're with, you're feeling their flavor, you're feeling their aura, you're drinking their nature, immediately and amorphously. That's also radiant presence, the same radiant presence, but on a subtler portion of the spectrum, a subtler portion of the bandwidth, you might say. But all of these vast range of experiential qualities and degrees of formfulness and formlessness is all the same thing. It's all one continuous spectrum. It's all the radiance. The way that presence appears to itself as all of this information, all of this form, all this apparent patterning that makes up your being, your world, and all of the complexities of manifestation. An interesting aspect of this that is discovered more in yoga, and for most people less in the course of a normal human consensus reality orientation, is that the vast majority of the spectrum of experience, of the spectrum of the radiance, is amorphous, is all subtle energies and formlessness and subtle vibes and so on and so forth. We don't have language to describe these things because, of course, human language is generated largely to describe sensory orientation to these kinds of patterns. We don't have words for the subtleties in English anyway, certainly so much. Maybe in Tibetan there's a little broader lexicon of terms that cover those kinds of things. But in yoga, as you become sensitized to taking an inventory of the full range of your experience, you'll discover that the vast majority of it is relatively formless. The formal part, the sensory experience, is actually relatively small. It's like a small bubble, let's say a bubble of light and sound and touch and so on, that's at the bottom of like a balloon that just goes up and up and up and out and out and out of a vast universe of subtler and subtler flavors of energy, you might say. All of that is right here, right now. All of that is you. All of that is the manifestation of your being. All of that is the radiant presence. That alone is. That is right here. That is what you are. That is what the universe is. That is what reality is. Feel the way that this is so. Explore the way that this is so. This is yoga. This is the yoga of radiant presence. You seem to be here, right? You seem to be experiencing your world, sitting here in your life with the room you're in, the house you're in, the town you're in, and the state you're in, the country you're in, all of this, just sitting here. And yet, all of this appears in your experience. There's nothing present but your experience. What's doing your experience? What is your experience? Is the world seems to be spread out in your experience, but does that mean your experience is spread out? How big is your experience? Does experience have size? When you're sleeping, in deep sleep, there's no size particularly, let's say. And then you start to dream, and you might dream of being in a big place, and this huge place just appears in your experience, and there it is. But does that mean that it comes from a big space, or does that mean that it just, whatever this is, has the power to appear as a big space, as if it was objectively appearing, like a bubble blowing and nothing, all of a sudden a bubble blows up and there's a world. A bubble blows up and there's a dream. A bubble blows up and there's your, your experience of your life and your body and your situation and all of that. But what is this experience itself that is doing this, that all of this actually consists of? The world consists of your experience. It exists because of your experience. Your experience is, and that enables worlds to appear. The world that's appearing right now appears because of your experience is here, is present, is actual. The world that appears in a dream is here because your experience is here. It's real, it's actual. So what is this reality that does this, that appears as space, that appears as objectivity, that appears as a world, that appears as other people, all of this? What is this that does that? This is what I mean by radiant presence, this principle. But it's more than just a principle. It's not a principle like a principle of philosophy. It's an actuality. It's right here, right now, and it's doing all this. But it doesn't mean it's necessarily big. It doesn't mean it's necessarily spread out. Or not. Who knows? But it's real, and you are feeling it right now. You've never felt anything but this radiant presence that is doing your experience, that your experience is made out of. But the radiant presence doesn't necessarily look like what your experience looks like. Consciousness doesn't necessarily look like what the worlds that appear, that it enables to appear, looks like. But what it looks like is not so important. One of the interesting aspects of radiant presence is that it appears so different from different perspectives. From a certain perspective, it appears like your sensory world. It appears like the world of your embodied experience. Sight, taste, touch, all of this, the whole world appearing right here, large, huge, the whole universe, right? From other perspectives, it appears very different. What does it appear like when you're in deep meditation? What does it appear like when you're in deep sleep? What does it appear like when you're in a dream? It's the same radiant presence. It's the same reality, but it can look so many different ways. It can seem to be spread out and objectified. It can seem to be relatively rarefied and subtle and amorphous, like a dream or like, deep meditation or general anesthesia or something. And yet it's always the same thing. It doesn't become different things when it presents with all these different apparitions, different ways that it seems to be. So, in yoga, you learn to be with the actuality that this is rather than just what it's presenting as, rather than just what it looks like. So, we have the sensory world as it appears. That's what it looks like. But what is this that is here that looks like that? And then you go to sleep and it looks different, but the same thing is here. What is this that looks like that and looks like this? What is this that's here? This is what's actually here, the radiant presence. This is what you actually are. This is what this actually is. And it is independent of what it looks like. It's independent of how it seems to be appearing, what seems to be happening. This that is here, this that's right here, the reality of your being, the reality of your experience, of yourself, your world, everything, is in actuality what I call radiant presence. It is a very mysterious thing, a very mysterious condition, only because its nature is so foreign to what we're ordinarily used to thinking about. Our ideas and our concepts are oriented towards specific things and objects that are differentiable from each other. They can exist in particular relationships with each other. Actions that can occur in various ways that are different from other actions. They can occur in various ways and so on. But this one thing that is here includes all of that, and yet is just one thing. It never becomes anything other than itself. It's very much like a dream, where in a dream, all sorts of different events can seem to happen, all sorts of different objects and complex relationships of circumstances can seem to be happening. But in actuality, there's only one thing there, the dreaming. There's nothing there but dreaming in a dream. There are no, even though it appears to be all this complexity, the complexity is actually just one thing. And likewise, in this condition, this actuality that is here, the same condition applies. This is one thing. This is simply what it is, the one thing that it is. Now, this can be difficult to discover and to see very clearly because we're so deeply steeped in a lifelong indoctrination that is not like that, a lifelong indoctrination that our materialist philosophy is true, that an objective world exists, that it's full of all sorts of separate things that are separate from each other and have their own identity and exist autonomously and so on. And it certainly can look as if that's so. That's certainly an interpretation that can be made, but it doesn't stand up to examination. And this, of course, is what yoga is. Yoga is an examination of your experience, of the reality of your being, to see for yourself what it truly is. And the only way to do this effectively is to suspend your preconceptions, to hold back your ideas and your certainties about what it is, and let yourself just investigate it as if you didn't know, just in case you might be a little bit wrong. And if you find yourself having the knack of being able to engage with this in a way that is effective, that enables you to actually explore what it really is outside of your preconceptions, then you're in for a wonderful, amazing journey of discovery. Because what this is so astounding and so wonderful, especially by contrast with what we're used to thinking of it as being, the difficulty of our material world, the challenges of our dysfunctional societies, our aging bodies and failing health, this, that, and the other. All of this, from the consensus reality materialist point of view, is a pretty bleak picture. But in actuality, it's not at all bleak. In actuality, it is an astounding show of miraculous presence that is eternal, that exists beyond space and time, and that you actually are nothing other than. Now, those are fabulous words, it's a fabulous notion, but the point is, see for yourself if that's true or not. Look and see what this really is for yourself. And I can say, from my experience, that you're in for a delightful adventure of discovery. But you have to see it for yourself in order for it to have power for you, for it to have power in your life. So, I strongly encourage you to play with this, to investigate your experience, to explore what is really going on, and especially to notice the way in which the momentary reality of your experience does not conform exactly to the materialist description that we've been indoctrinated in. Attention seems to become numb to what seems to be more or less always present. And it settles into a condition of taking it for granted, not really paying attention to it, not really noticing or appreciating what is here. And it settles upon the new things, the distracting things, the anomalies that show up. And we experience this as well in the spiritual context. Here we have this actual manifest presence of reality itself. This is it. This is the real thing. This is the beginning and the end of the story right here. And yet, we, rather than putting our attention on this and really appreciating it, we take it for granted as just the ever-present medium of the details of our lives, which we tend to find much more interesting. And of course, it's insidious because it's like an addiction. We become very, very heavily conditioned over the years to following the details, to following the content, to following the narrative, and missing the fact that the juice, the power, is really just in the presence itself, and this that is here. The medium of experience is the power of experience, is the value of experience, not the content, not the narrative. But typically, we have to completely ask backwards, completely upside down, and think that the content is what's important. And we completely ignore the medium, we ignore what it is that is here in favor of what seems to be happening. So yoga, of course, is remedial of this. In yoga, the yogi learns to pay attention to experience itself, pay attention to what is actually here, and study it and investigate it. And this is a path of astounding discovery and exciting revelation, because the nature of what this is, the nature of what is discovered, and looking into what is here, is miraculous, is amazing. Of course, I know all of you are familiar with this, but it doesn't hurt to be reminded of the basics, because really it's the fundamentals that are the fine points. It's the fundamentals that are the real finishing tool. The fundamental presence of this reality is the icing on the cake, is the grad tool, is the real revelation of actual enlightenment. So heading back to basics again and again is what yoga consists of. We get ambitious and try to depart into sophistication, and as soon as we do so, we're often running into fantasy again. This simple presence, this simple actuality is where all the juice is where all the value is. And eventually this is how it gets through. Eventually, you realize this is it. This right here is it. And this is the big payoff. This is the whole of spirituality. This that is here, this being, this existence, this reality, your being, your reality, is very interesting in that what it is independent of what it looks like. Of course, ordinarily people are very focused on what it looks like, what's happening, what's going on, what the circumstances and events seem to be occurring. But what this is entirely independent of what it looks like. What this is exactly the same thing when it looks like sitting here talking, when it looks like out driving a car, when it looks like going to sleep, when it looks like being in deep sleep, when it looks like dreaming, when it looks like having an intense emotional identification and reaction, when it looks like being in a relaxed, disidentified state of bliss. It's all the same. It's all exactly the same thing. Experience is this. Experience is this being that is here. And that's the only thing that's here. And what this is such that it can look like whatever it happens to look like. But it never changes. It never becomes anything other than itself. It never becomes anything other than what it is, regardless of what it looks like. In very much the same way, by analogy, as the way a TV just stays being a TV, regardless of what show's on, regardless of what movie's on. You play a horror movie, the TV doesn't get scary. You play a romance, the TV doesn't get mushy. The TV is just here. It just is what it is. And yet, because of its nature, it can appear with all of this apparent amazing information. And likewise, what this is very much like that. This that is here, this that I call radiant presence, this being, this actuality, its nature is inalienably what it is. It does not change one iota. And you are this that is here. You are this radiant presence. You don't change. What it looks like is obviously completely changeable, absolutely spontaneous, instantaneous, always different, never repeating, always, different forever till the end of time. It's different, always looking different, but it itself does not change. This is a very strange paradox. It's unthinkable to the mind, because the mind thinks of, well, what's changing, and then it imagines something sitting here that's not changing. But there's nothing sitting here that's not changing. What is changing is what doesn't change. There is no TV, there's just a show, but the show itself is this radiant presence. There's no infrastructure, there's no background sitting here. There's no radiant presence sort of somehow sitting off stage that's responsible for all this stuff showing up. The stuff showing up is the radiant presence. And yet, what it is immutable, is eternal, is beyond space and time. It is eternal being, eternal consciousness, eternal meaningfulness, eternal fullness. So this is unthinkable. The mind tries to follow it, and the mind tries to structuralize it, and it will always fail, because the nature of what it is not like that. The nature of what it is too subtle and slippery to be captured in these structural, concretizing ways. But it is knowable. It is feelable. You feel it. You are feeling it right now. You feel nothing but this. Feel the constancy of the presence of your being. Your being right now is the same being as it was when you were 2, right? Your you-ness right now is the same you-ness. I am here means exactly the same thing now as it did when I was 5, as it will on my deathbed, actually as it will after I die, although there'll be no me sitting here to say it, but the meaning will be the same. And this is the medium of yoga. This is the target of yoga. This is the goal of yoga. This being that is here, that this is, that by its nature is so inconceivable and yet so completely obvious and so thoroughly known. You know this so intimately. You've never known anything but. And coming to see it as it is slippery, mainly because of the power and the potency of our identifications and conceptualizations of what it is, our heavy-handed interpretations. Where we so effortlessly define what we are, what the world is, what objects are, what matter is, what events are, what time is, what yesterday was, what tomorrow is, all of these things, bang, the mind just shoots this out effortlessly, and it seems so concrete and so, uncontestable. And yet, What this is none of that. It's not like any of that, even though it's the basis for all of that theorizing to be done. But this can be known, this is known as it is, simply through feeling. Feel this, feel it intimately, sensitively, intelligently. Feel the nature of this, feel its slipperiness, feel its presence, feel its liveliness. Feel the intelligence of the way it engages itself. What we call consciousness. And this is yoga. Spirituality is a strategy to investigate your reality, your being, what you are, what your world is, to discover what it truly is for yourself. Of course, science does this. Humans have always done this. And we pretend to have a current version of things, a current theory of things, or let's say a vast range of current theories of things that are typically more or less accepted as the status quo, the consensus reality. Depending upon, how sophisticated you are, how cutting edge you are, you may have the idea of, the sort of a materialistic universe where the world exists outside you objectively and you exist separate from it as a biochemical, bioelectrical byproduct of configurations of atoms in your brain and so on. Or if you're more sophisticated, you may look at quantum mechanics and look at entanglement and this incredible dance of energy fields or particles that are all interrelated to each other and essentially exist in ways that are very, very strange and don't really conform to a simplistic materialistic idea at all, which is, of course, just another theory. And then there's other theories coming down the pike. Each one, the way things are going now, each one a little further out than the previous one. And all these theories are very nice, but what they are is stories of what other people have found in various configurations of research and investigation. But spirituality, yoga, takes a more personal approach. In yoga, the yogi, me, investigates for myself firsthand to see if I can see what this is. What is my being? What is my reality? And yoga is simply the pursuit of this investigation. What one investigates, of course, is one's reality. And in investigating one's reality, one discovers fairly quickly that what one's really investigating is one's experience. And so the question in spirituality very rapidly becomes, well, what is experience? Again, not in terms of theories, not in terms of descriptions, but firsthand, up close and personal. What is experience? What is this that is here? What is this? You look at experience, you discover some interesting, very obvious, self-verifying facts about it. First of all, it is. It's actual. Whatever that means, you don't need to worry about what it means, but it undeniably is. It undeniably is actual. It undeniably has being. It has presence. It is here. Whatever here means. It is this. Whatever this means. But it is. But that it is. And another interesting thing about this being that self-verifyingly is that it seems to present as all sorts of apparent information, all sorts of apparent experiential qualities, all of these colors and brightnesses and what we call vision, frequencies and loudnesses and what we call sound, strange alignments and so on, and what we call thought, whatever. All of these, this astounding spectrum of information, of characteristics is constantly being presented. Is another self-verifying fact. It's undeniable. What it is, descriptively, is open to debate, and that's fine, but that it is undeniable. It's self-verifying that this is this. It is present, and it is radiant with all of these characteristics, the fact of experience, the fact of experiential qualities. So then, even that, this is the field of yoga. This is the field of investigation. What is this radiant presence? What is this that is? What is, how does it work? What is going on with it? Now, this investigation is pursuable not through abstraction or conceptualization, but is pursuable through the direct engagement of experience itself, irrationally and yet very intelligently, because you are this being, you are your experience. So you can explore it from the point of view of this being of it. What is it? What in the same sense that it's self-verifyingly exists, in the same sense that it's self-verifyingly presents as all these characteristics, it also self-verifyingly has qualities, it has aspects, it has flavors. And discovering these for yourself and exploring them for yourself is the path of yoga, is the path of the unfoldment of spirituality. And the cutting edge of yoga is that there is more to your experience than you're aware of, than you ordinarily recognize. Now, it's important to notice that this more is not in any particular way that you can expect or can anticipate. It may just be some subtlety in something you're experiencing. It may be a whole range of flavors or qualities, sort of extrasensory qualities, vibes or something, that you're not used to noticing or recognizing or paying much attention to. It may be in some kinds of meaningfulness that you find in something you see, something that seems to occur. And there's no limit to how much more there is than you are consciously acknowledging. And this remains the case eternally. Your experience is literally infinite in terms of its range of qualities and its quantity as well. So typically we acknowledge we inhabit a very small portion of our experience and sort of set up housekeeping there, and that becomes our normalcy. But there is so much more in experience that we ordinarily do not identify with, that we do not hold as our normalcy. And discovering and investigating these ranges of experiential quality, these ranges of experiential texture and meaningfulness is what the process of yoga looks like. The slipperiness of experience, the fact that what you are most familiar with, what you hold to be most normal, is in fact more than that, is in fact the entryway, the doorway into newness, the doorway into otherness, into more. You don't need to do extreme experiences. I know it's very fashionable these days to take exotic psychedelic drugs and such, which is fine if that's what you're drawn to do. But you don't actually need to do that, because normal experience, your everyday sitting around going to work, whatever experience, or not going to work, sitting at home and being on the computer in these dark ages, is is in fact the doorway to amazing dimensions, to amazing undiscovered qualities that your experience intrinsically consists of and has always available to you without needing to, you know, uh, push the envelope of exotic behaviors or exotic states of mind. The exotic states of mind are all right here. Any state of mind is completely exotic. Your normal state of mind is completely inconceivable, completely magical. You know, that we can take a frame of mind as being normal is mind-boggling. Consciousness is here. You know, this is an unbelievable miracle. It's like consciousness. What the fuck is that? You know, it's mind-blowing. And yet we just, you know, it's like, well, yeah, first I'm here and I'm conscious, sure, kind of. But, you know, just to let yourself feel and appreciate and then relax into the subtleties of what any experience whatsoever consists of, I guarantee you will be an opening doorway into more and other, into newness, into surprising range of revelation. And this discovery of the openness, the unresolvability, the infinity of experience is the discovery of reality, the discovery of what this is. That this is boundless, this is limitless, this is not some simple or dull or mechanical causal situation. This is a literal ongoing miracle, inconceivable. Um, so I invite you to continue to explore it, and especially honor your own revelation, honor your own experience. Don't try to approximate what you read in books or what someone says or what I say or anything else. Be with your own experience and let yourself discover your own strangeness. Let yourself discover your own surprisingness. And don't expect it to conform to anything that you may have heard or thought or read about.